everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square, and it is now 2026, which means the midterms are upon us. And with the many disasters of Trump's first year of his second term coming home to roost, polls are looking better and better for Democrats heading into the election season. One candidate who has been setting the bar for how other campaigns are being run is Kat Abughazaleh. Sorry about that. She is a social media influencer, and she used to be with Media Matters. You may know her work from there. She's now running in Illinois' 9th district in suburban Chicago, and she has literally put her body on the line in protests against ICE. She's also held some inventive campaign meetups, and she's now joining us to talk with us about all of this. Thank you so much, Kat.
Thank you so much for having me. And no worries on the last name. It's Abughazaleh. And I would just like to say I'm a researcher and journalist. I think that especially men in media have ascribed the influencer label, but just wanted to clarify.
Appreciate that. And people usually mess up my name as well, even though it's short. So apologize for that.
Gotta be real. I thought it was Demas. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I actually, funny, I'll just mention a local connection. You're running in Evanston, and my family used to run Demas Foods there that people probably
cool.
Demas, but anyway, that's the way it's pronounced. Yeah, I have my mother actually graduated from Evanston High, so I'm very familiar with the area. And I know that it's been through a lot of changes. I know that you have been really involved in what's been going on at the local level. Long before Minneapolis, we had Operation Midway Blitz, where ICE came into Chicago and was met with lots of protests, a big show of force. They kind of left with their tail between their legs. But not before, they kind of started some of these super aggressive techniques with gassing crowds, with assaulting people, including yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience as much as you can? Because I know there is a court case, but we've all seen the footage, and it's pretty harrowing.
Yeah. Before I get into my personal experience, I really want to stress the reason that we were protesting in the first place. And that's because ICE was abducting people from our communities. My district goes from uptown Chicago up to Evanston, west to Skokie, all the way to Crystal Lake and Algonquin. This was happening all over Chicago, abducting people and sending them to the Broadview Processing Center, which is just right outside of Chicago. The stories we have heard from in the facility from people who were willing to speak out despite risks to them and their family describe a place where people are literally sleeping standing up because they're packed so many into a cell. Grandmothers and pregnant women sleeping on the floor because this is a processing center, not a detention facility. So there aren't any beds. There aren't any hot meals. There was one toilet. And if you soiled yourself before the one bathroom break you could have in a day, you'd be beaten. If you wouldn't sign your own self-deportation, you'd be beaten. People literally going into cardiac arrest because there was no ventilation, because ICE put plywood over the windows so we couldn't see what was going on inside. So everything that people saw happening to me and others on camera, that's what they were willing to do on camera. Imagine what they're doing behind closed doors.
I think that's a really important point because, we have seen what they've done in LA, in Chicago, and now, for over a month in Minneapolis. And obviously, 2 American citizens have lost their lives. They're not the only ones. ICE has also killed other people as well. But to me, the biggest story that has not been told is what is actually going on inside these camps. We hear some reporting with Liam Ramos, the 5-year-old who has finally been ordered to be free from the camps, but there is so much that we don't know on the inside. And I want to know, because you are a journalist, who is doing the best reporting on this, and what more needs to be done? Because this does not seem to be a story that corporate media is digging into nearly as much as I think they should.
Yeah, there are a lot of really great independent journalists, and especially at the local level, like during Midway Blitz, Chicago media was on it. absolutely on it. We're seeing the same thing in Minneapolis. I think when it hits your community and it's not like a national outlet, that coverage is a lot more in depth. Of course, we know what happened with 60 Minutes with CBS covering the Salvadoran concentration camp, CCOT, and I really recommend people go to Marissa Cavas. Her newsletter, The Handbasket, is really great for covering the Trump administration. She often scoops major outlets. Additionally, Amanda Moore is a good friend. She usually spends most of her time tracking Nazis, but now she's tracking ICE. She's a badass. She's been out with me at Broadview, which, back to your original question, I first went there for a vigil this past summer, and plywood wasn't on the windows. It was very quiet. The ICE agents were scared of us, so they called in Uber Eats, despite it just being a bunch of people like praying and old Jewish grandmas. When I went a few weeks later for the first time for these Friday protests after the arrests of Rev Black and Rachel Cohen, it escalated week after week. So the first week, no weapons were deployed, but a car to try to come in, and then it turned around. The next week was actually the first time I was thrown to the ground. I think everyone and their dog has seen that video of a small blonde woman getting pile drive to the ground. That was me. And that was actually the third time that ICE has thrown me. They consistently threw me, dragged my friend, but they started deploying gas. They started shooting us with pepper bullets. The next week, it was even worse. They shot the ground with pepper bullets at our First Amendment rights were on the sidewalk before kidnapping a protester. And then a van came out and tried to run people over. And then they threw tear gas, not just at the people protesting, but also at the media. There was a second tear gas canister thrown by the media trucks. The week after that, it just got worse and worse and worse. And once again, this is what they're willing to do on camera. And I think it's one of these things, especially in my case, where a lot of people were abhorred by what they saw. You know, I'm Palestinian, look at my last name, but also look at me. I look like the whitest person in the world. And a lot of people saw that video. And just as with Renee Good and Alex Preddy, they're like, well, state violence isn't supposed to be used against those people. Like Keith Porter was also murdered by ICE. And yet I think even if it's not, even from people's perspectives of not valuing one life more than another, the shock of, especially for white Americans, being like, oh, now we aren't protected, has been jarring for people. But it's really important to remember that this isn't new for ICE. They are making their tactics a lot more aggressive publicly and against anyone, including the so-called protected classes. But ICE has been terrorizing communities for, since 2003. And the U.S. has disproportionately used violence against Black and brown folks since its inception.
So if you were elected to Congress, what would you be doing in terms of ICE and DHS funding and just those institutions as a whole?
I'm going to go into like my end game and then what I can actually do under a Trump presidency, and with the Supreme Court being the farce that it is. We need to not just abolish ICE. Abolish ICE isn't enough. We need to prosecute ICE. We need trials. We need to dismantle DHS. There were immigration services before ICE. We had INS. There was a world before ICE. There will be a world after ICE. And any agency, and that includes DHS and ICE, that can function as a secret police force should not exist. There is no reforming to be done. There are plenty of different strategies for immigration. This is not one of them. This is a terror squad. But of course, this administration doesn't care about the law. They will bully any representatives they can, especially Republicans. So under this administration, I think my priority will be limiting CBP's jurisdiction from 100 miles from any international border. That includes the Great Lakes, that includes coasts, to 5 or 10 miles. I think that is a common sense solution that we can, especially as ICE terrorizes even red places, we could get some Republicans on board with under the, guise of small government that they say they're so committed to. But really, it's going to be a worry about re-election. If their constituents are being terrorized, what can they do to show some type of consolation? We need to impeach Kristi Noem. We also need trials for Kristi Noem. I think we should sign on to the Rome Statute because I do believe she should be tried at The Hague. These are crimes against humanity. Additionally, immigration reform is really important. That's why we need a Marshall Plan for the government. This doesn't just mean immigration. It means education. It means housing, groceries, healthcare. It means climate action. All of these are intrinsically tied with each other. And when we treat them as separate issues, we get a piecemeal approach. And so a lot of this is going to be hiring a larger federal workforce, eliminating bureaucracy, because if you've ever met anyone hired by the government, the federal government, it can sometimes take years to get hired. We need to be eliminating that bureaucracy, hiring more people, and ensuring that we eliminate refugee camps to bring immigrants in, because that's what makes this country great.
There have been recent reports about ICE looking at purchasing warehouses all across the country to house people. What can be done at the local level to fight back against that? Because that is a problem well before the midterms.
Yeah, and it's disgusting. And I am not an expert in municipal law, especially because they differ from place to place to place. I know that a lot of organizations and a lot of people have looked at buying these properties before ICE can, and I think that rocks. But really, it's about actually standing up to it. Like at Broadview, the Broadview PD stood by as we were shot, as we were thrown, as we were kidnapped. That's collaboration. We can't have any collaboration. I look at so many places across the country where you hear big talk from leaders, and yet police are just standing by while ICE is there. I think that our police force is very, very flawed in the current system. But if we actually want to believe that it's here to serve and protect, well, who do you serve and who do you protect? So I think it's really important for cities to, especially when they're worried about the Insurrection Act, stop having your police facing the protesters. Face ICE. That is who you're protecting us from.
Do you support governors calling in the National Guard against ICE?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why do you think it took so long for Governor Walz, for instance, to actually do that? Is there a problem with current Democratic leadership where they're not taking bold enough action?
There absolutely is a problem with this. And I'm going to send you a link to something in the studio chat because I want you to read it, the headline instead. One sec. This is a really good piece that I think very encapsulates kind of the issue here. It's by Caitlin Burns. Here you
go. The piece is called "Democrats Must Kill Their Inner Cops." And the photo is of your governor, J.B. Pritzker.
But it's referencing a lot of governors here. And I think that this is the issue of, I have you reading that because I'm under federal indictment and I want to make sure that what I am saying is clear. This piece is talking about how the status quo doesn't work anymore. And a lot of well-meaning politicians, including our own governor, including Tim Walz, who I have really respected, are operating from a framework that we need, that these systems are the same, that like this is a blip, that we need to reform them, that, well, this is law enforcement, so ICE is law enforcement, so instead we should give them more body cams, instead we should give them more training. But no, ICE is doing what they are trained to do. They don't need body cams. Jonathan Ross filmed his murder of Renee Good. All a body cam would do would allow him to murder her with 2 hands. So I think that one of the issues with lack of bold action is, first off, nationally worrying about catering to the right, this idea of moderation that just means moving to the right, but then also this idea, and it's really hard to shake a status quo that's existed for so long, but this idea that, well, our system couldn't fail us this badly, so we need to ICE is presented as a law and order solution. We need to respect the rule of law, but this isn't the rule of law. This is lawlessness. Highly recommend you read that piece, by the way. It's great.
You're one of the people who decided that you were not going to wait for, your representative to retire to run. You saw that there needed to be change and change now. And there are a lot of younger candidates, Gen Z, millennials, who have taken that position and are either challenging sitting representatives in a primary, or, they've run aggressive campaigns. And sometimes, people like Jan Schakowsky have decided not to run. Talk to us about why you decided this was the time to run, and what your conversations have been with other people who are looking to run different campaigns, not for let's reset and go back to 2020 or 2016, but we need something totally different. And that's the message that Democrats need to have going into this election.
Yeah, I mean, our case is kind of interesting because a lot of these primary challenges are against the incumbent. And when I launched, it wasn't even like a vendetta. I think there's literally a headline that says this is not a vendetta against Representative Jan Schakowsky, who I very much respect. But I was very clear in our launch that I just saw an issue with the Democratic Party, and I kept sitting around wondering, when is someone going to do something? When is someone going to be the person that I want to see in Congress? And that's someone who understands the far right. My colleagues and I have spent years trying to convince Democrats and educate Democrats on the threat of the far right. We told them about January 6th before it happened. We told them about where the DEI, CRT, anti-trans panic would lead, and they didn't listen. So I got sick of waiting for someone to listen, and I decided to run myself. And because I have a large platform that, yes, I've built with my own reporting, it's still such a privilege to have. So I was able to do things differently, like using our campaign office as a mutual aid hub, or fundraising via live stream rather than call time. There are lots of group chats with like challenger candidates across the country. And honestly, I think the solidarity of all of us being broke young people is a thing keeping me going. It's so hard to run for office, especially if you're young, especially if you're a challenger, but especially if you're working class. I truly don't. I only have a cat. I don't know how people with kids do this if they're not making, $200,000 a year already, or they have six figures in the bank. I don't have that. But the thing that we're hearing over and over again is like millennials I'm like the older Gen Z. I'm 1999. But millennials were taught you do all the right things and then you'll be successful. You go to college, you'll get a family, you'll buy a house, and they were lied to. And then Gen Z, we weren't even lied to. They were just kind of like, screw you, have fun. You're not going to, but that's the way the world is. And so we have been able to especially see the world as like, well, the world's never been good for us. So what if it was just completely different? We don't want incrementalism, because those small piecemeal approaches have never helped us. Like during COVID with the stimulus checks, I had just graduated college in May 2020. And despite working and having my own income, and I worked through college as well, I didn't get a stimulus check because I technically was still my parents' dependent because I had been in college. And so that made 2020 even harder for me. And I know so many friends that were in the same boat that weren't even in college or graduating from college at that point. We live in we see how much wealth is concentrated in so few people. And we wonder, well, we have the money. Why don't we do these things?
So I'm obviously not Gen Z, I'm Gen X, but my daughter ran for office for the first time when she was 21, like right after she graduated from college.
That's incredible.
And she ran at the local level. She is my township clerk. She runs our elections. She won. But she encountered, I'm sure, a lot of kind of the pushback that you have and other candidates have, which is wait your turn. You don't understand the system. Get a little more experience. You don't really understand how any of this works. And I feel like that is a really defeatist message. And more than that, I see that on the issue of ICE and what is going on with Trump's immigration policy. Right now, elected leaders in Congress are way behind where the American people are. ICE is not popular, even with independents. It has lost a lot of support, even with Republicans, with working class white male voters, which, has kind of been the bread and butter for MAGA. But you still see this cautious incrementalism coming out of Democratic leadership. How do you get them to move? Do you need this wave of young people coming in where suddenly, you're not just a couple voices, but you're the chorus?
Yeah. I mean, we need leverage. And by the way, kudos to your daughter. And it's so funny, especially with young women, the goalposts keep getting moved, because I've been told I should have run for the exact same position your daughter ran for, of you need more experience. And if you're always waiting, if like now isn't the time, I don't know when is. And also, this is the point of a primary. If voters think that we don't have enough experience, if voters think that we're not ready for this moment, then someone else will win, and that's fine. That's democracy. But everyone has a right to run if they fulfill the obligations needed to get on the ballot. But as far as this idea, I always say we need to win a majority of the majority. So Democrats need to take back the House, but we need to have a large coalition of progressive voters that can leverage our votes. As someone that has been steeped in MAGA and right-wing media, there are a lot of strategies that we can use for good. One, for instance, is a lack of shame about things you don't need to be ashamed about. The amount of times that Republicans have pulled up this picture of me in fishnet stockings and been like, look at this whore trying to run for office. And then we just screenshot it and say, look how weird these people are being, and raise $10,000. It's kind of the same vibe of the president not being ashamed of grabbing women by their genitals, except one is harmless and one is evil. The same goes for using leverage in your own party. Part of what has been so successful about right-wing media is it's been able to criticize the Republican Party and move it further to the right. Democratic media has been unwilling or unable to do that, maybe for fear of pressure, maybe for fear of backlash, maybe for fear of caving. As many people say, the Democratic Party is really good at getting power back, but they're horrible at using it. So we need to, just as a caucus of more aggressive Republicans withheld their votes for certain items, even under the Trump administration. We need to have the same in the Democratic Party, except instead of asking for more funding for ICE, insists that we need to pass the Block the Bombs Act, that we need to ban stock trading and force members to sell their individual stocks, that we need to ensure that we will not only abolish but prosecute ICE and say, look, you're not going to be able to pass anything if it is not actually for the people.
You spent so much time covering the far right for Media Matters in particular. And so like you are well versed in the techniques of the far right, how they're able to galvanize people and manipulate facts, people like Tucker Carlson on down. Do you think that that has kind of given you a leg up over other Democrats right now, that you saw this threat, you covered it in depth, and it's not the fringe, it's taken over the entire party?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is basically the reason that I ran, because it is impossible to compromise or have a good faith conversation with someone who's steeped in conspiracy theories. One example that I often give is when, I'm not sure if you ever heard a conspiracy theory that Joe Biden was hiring 80,000 IRS agents to audit you at gunpoint. Yeah, that was basically a 4chan conspiracy theory that was normalized by Tucker. And I actually did a training with a senator's staff on how to use Fox News as a weapon and use this example, because what you'll see on Tucker on Friday night would be on the House floor on Tuesday. So he brought on Matt Gaetz on a Friday for the D block, the fourth block of the show. They mentioned this in passing. Then Monday, he brings it up in the C block and talks about it a bit more. And then again in the C block on Tuesday. And then Wednesday doesn't really mention it. But by Friday, there's a whole ass monologue. And sure enough, we see Republicans complaining about it on the House floor the next week. It also allows you to, we don't need to care what fascists think about us. And if you're able to understand their full picture, you can realize, just kind of like that 2 weeks where it felt like Kamala Harris would be a change candidate, saying, that's weird. Why are you talking about kids' genitals all the time? And then moving on to the shit that actually matters. That's what we should be doing. It also, this work has helped me really understand how narratives are made and what people care about. And the reason that Trump resonates with a lot of people is the status quo wasn't working ever. We can't go back to normal. There's no pre-2020 life. And even then, it wasn't working for a lot of people. But it's a lot harder to build something and then tear something down, or to keep it the same. So I think that the reason we actually have a lot of Republicans support us is not because we've been trotting out Liz Cheney, but it's because I actually believe in something, and they see that and they're thinking, she says we all deserve housing, groceries, and healthcare. Does that include me? And I'm like, yeah.
I know that you are Palestinian American, and we've all watched the absolute horror in Gaza. Talk to us about your assessment of the so-called peace deal that President Trump has offered, because there's just not very much news out of that region anymore, and it's not like things are okay.
Yeah, it makes me want to vomit. I've said before, I've never been to Palestine because even with an American passport, you'll often be detained. And my father really didn't want that to happen. Also,
Mm.
Texas post 9/11, like we weren't allowed to learn Arabic. And that makes,
Mm.
it's hard. It's hard. As a member of Congress, though, I want to go on a fact-finding mission because journalists have not been allowed inside Gaza. And there is a reason for that. Because all of the horror that we've seen is just the tip of the iceberg. Trump's plan for peace in Gaza is disgusting. It means displacing more people. It means taking their homes. It means stealing their land. It means disenfranchising them, and it means killing them. They don't give a damn about peace. They want to use Gaza as hotel grounds. I'm not sure if you've seen the map of the red zone, the yellow zone, and the green zone, but essentially it would take even more Palestinian land, put it under Israeli occupation, and then the place where Palestinians are allowed to live would just continue to be rubble with these same measures that wouldn't allow any aid inside, that wouldn't allow building supplies even. It's so frustrating seeing this president pretend that he's the peace president when he is and has always supported and is supporting an active genocide.
And he's talked actively about, removing residents from Gaza and the West Bank to make room for his many business ideas, which is the definition of ethnic cleansing. I live in Michigan now, and the war in Gaza was a very pivotal issue in the 2024 election. And a lot of people decided to flip their vote for Trump because they felt that he could not be as bad as Biden on the issue. A lot of people have buyer's regret, buyer's remorse over that because, they've seen what Trump's peace deal looks like. But what is your assessment? Because, this has been an ongoing tragedy for years.
This also didn't start just before October 7th. It's like my father was born stateless. My grandparents were expelled in the Nakba. But as far as people that voted Republican or stayed home in 2024, I think it's about damn time we stop blaming the voters and start blaming candidates and parties for failing. And it's Tim Walz is the only person associated with the Harris campaign that I saw say sorry. I was actually approached by a PAC that was working closely with the Harris campaign. I was asked to lead their Arab American outreach in swing states like Michigan. There is no reason in our two-party system that any candidate of the major two parties should come in third in any district, but that did happen in Michigan. And I said I would do it for free. I would ask for no money if I could get 10 minutes on air with Kamala Harris. And that was because I knew that my family, the people who weren't going to vote, there was nothing that would be more convincing to them than her actually talking to a Palestinian person, which she didn't do publicly. There was a lot of talks about like closed doors. I remember sleeping on the concrete outside the DNC because Representative Ruah Roman, who's running for governor in Georgia now, wasn't allowed to go on stage and endorse Harris as a Palestinian woman. That was such a misstep for no reason except racial and ethnic discrimination. And they said they couldn't make that happen. And I said, you know what you're doing is wrong. And they said, yes. And I said, well, there is no amount of door knocking or TikTok dances that could convince people than just talking to a Palestinian person. As screwed up as it is, like what we were talking about with ICE, if you're worried about it being unpalatable, maybe get the whitest looking Palestinian person in the world. But I don't care who it is, as long as it's someone, but I'm trying to give you an out here. And they just said no.
Do you think that ultimately that was the issue that cost her the election?
I think it was one of them. And I don't think that my presence would have been the only thing. Like, I don't think that would be the saving grace. I don't think it would have saved 2024. I think that that was a big thing for a lot of people, not just for Muslims or Arabs, but anti-war people, everyone who is struggling and then sees billions upon billions of our dollars being sent to bomb children. We're already seeing ICE using techniques and technology from the IDF. So whatever they'll do to someone else, they will do to us. And we saw time and time again that in swing states, the amount of people that would be much more likely to vote for Kamala Harris if she said anything supportive of Gaza, anything, like even just very basic positions, was far greater than the people who wouldn't vote for her at all. And we saw this in New York, too, with Cuomo trying to fearmonger about Zohran Mamdani. But our system is absolutely unwilling to support Palestinian sovereignty or safety.
Is that an issue that you will be fighting for if you get to Congress as well? Will this be one of your top issues?
Absolutely. I want to support the Block the Bombs Act also as a part of the affordability agenda, because we're sending a lot of money to Israel and not obeying our own laws. I am just asking our country to obey our own laws. If a country that we are supplying with weapons is suspected of violating international law, we have to pause that and investigate it. At the same time, I know lots of people want to make this race about Israel and Palestine. And I have been really clear. I'm happy to talk about this issue. Well, not happy, but I'm willing to talk about anything. But my positions aren't radical. Just because I'm Palestinian, just because I have a kafia, doesn't mean it kind of reminds me of growing up in Texas post 9/11. It doesn't mean that I or anyone that's Palestinian is a terrorist. I want what everyone else does. I want every civilian to be safe. I want no child to starve. I want every war criminal to be held accountable, and that doesn't matter what flag they're under. And I think that we need Palestinian statehood, because you can't negotiate a solution unless you're on equal footing.
You are facing a very competitive primary, and I know the election is just next month. What is the number one issue that you are hearing from your constituents?
Democracy and ICE. I've never seen this in a House race before. Every poll has shown this.
Actually, more than affordability?
Every single poll shows that, and that's what I've been hearing at the doors too. Yeah. But we're all traumatized from ICE.
Yes. You've seen it right there in your backyard.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you taking so much time to talk with us about your experience and your campaign as well. Thank you for being here, Kat.
Thank you so much for having me. Can I plug the campaign real quick?
Absolutely.
If you want to support us, you can go to catforillinois.com. That's cat with a K. If you want to volunteer, even if you're not in Illinois, you can do so at discord.gg/catforillinois. If you have any friends that live in the Chicago area, please text them right now. Text them. Be like, have you heard about this lady? Election day is March 17th. Early voting starts in 3 days. Ballots are going out in 3 days. I'm tied for first. We have a shot at winning this. This is one of those progressive campaigns where, yes, we'll actually win, but we need your help. So catforillinois.com, discord.gg/catforillinois. Text your friends, phone bank for us, text bank for us, door knock, all the stuff.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Susan.